Greetings, everyone. It's Dr. Mordecai, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai. On today, my guest, Dr. John Lopez, amazing individual with an amazing story. He's a national best-selling author. You can purchase his book on Amazon. We'll talk about that here in a moment. He served our country through the U.S. Navy. He holds dual citizenship in the United States of America and Belize. Came to this country as an immigrant, as a child, learned the language. He's now supporting others as CEO of Intercambio Uniting Communities, teaching them English. He also serves as president of Lopez Research and Consulting. Such an amazing story, and uniquely tells his story of how he came to this country as an immigrant and became an executive at the highest levels, achieving and now supporting others in their journey. Without further ado, join me for my interview with Dr. John Lopez. Greetings, everyone. It's Dr. Mordecai, and it is time now for Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai. I have a guest. The first time I met this amazing individual was at the Higher Learning Commission meeting, annual conference, and I learned about his book, which I got to highlight here. Dr. John Lopez wrote this amazing book, An Immigrant in the C-Suite, From the Journey, Lessons for the Business Community. We have with us on today, Dr. John Lopez. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing well, sir. I'm pleased to join you.
Thank you so much. Listen, let's jump right into it because I definitely want to talk about this book, and I'm going to hold it up again. I'm going to tell everyone you need to buy this book. Go on Amazon, buy this book. It is an amazing book that tells an amazing story from an amazing lens. Can you tell the listeners, the watchers about this book, why you wrote this book? It's an amazing body of work.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity. I published the book pre-COVID. It was November of 19. I decided to take that year off from work just to travel and take a little time for me and spend time with family. I realized that within a couple months I was bored to tears, and I was on the way back from Belize on a flight, and this gentleman was saying a lot of things about immigrants that just didn't seem to ring true to me. So I got home and I shared with him my perspective. I got home. I started looking up things to make sure that I was actually speaking truth and the data actually supported what I was telling him. And I was confident about it, but I needed to be sure. Well, about 6-7 hours later, I had all this stuff compiled, and I thought, I should write an article or do something with this. And unexpectedly, at the end of that, said, let me take a month and see what this can turn into. I then set a deadline of 120 days. When I was finished writing and analyzing and defining, I was just going to leave it or send it to a publisher. So after 120 days, I sent it, and you have the book. So the impetus for it was really just a random conversation on a plane with a gentleman who was saying things that just didn't seem to make sense, and wasn't the proper narrative through my lens. So that's how the book came about. It tells the story of this gentleman, and I will say, for those of you who might ever read it, there are similarities between Mr. Enriquez, the subject of the book, and myself. He's a real human, and so I thought, okay, let me blend a couple stories, and let's see what comes of this. It tells his journey from Central America to many cities in the United States. His family was this diverse, some Hispanics, some Garifuna, some blacks. It tells his journey from just a third world country to coming to a first world country, trying to live the life of a successful first world country person. It's really, really difficult. Having done it myself, I'm from Belize. So I know the journey, and which is in part why I think I'm perfectly positioned to write this story, because there's so many similarities. And so we talk about, so the book is a journey through the book. We talk about, the landscape. And again, this is pre-COVID, but and after the election of the last president. And so things were at a fever pitch in some ways. So I go through kind of laying the landscape, defining. One of the biggest struggles for me was, what is an immigrant? Because in some ways, we all are, depending on how far back you want to go. But I had to define it. So, for example, I was born in Belize, and both of my parents are from there. But my nieces and nephews, they were born in the States, but their parents were born elsewhere. And some of them have very much more of an immigrant mentality and perspective than I do because I've been here since I was a child. But they were raised in very, very deep-rooted immigrant families. So it was my nephew actually that said, "How are you defining that?" Because even though I'm an American, I see myself as an immigrant. And so I had to really wrestle with that. And so then we walk through, in the second chapter, we really tell the story of Anthony Enriquez, who the youngest of a large family and was raised with spirituality, humility, and education as foundations of what to aspire to. And then he came to the United States, and all of a sudden, fame, fortune, power became the markers. And he's trying to figure out how do you navigate this, and to see how he became the person that he was from childhood with his Central American roots to assimilating into and adopting, but at times fighting the fame, fortune, and power of the United States was an interesting journey in terms of who is he, what's his identity, what's his image, and then how does he navigate the corporate journey when most people are very, very connected to their network, and so if you don't fit into that, it becomes difficult to break in. And so then we tell the story of cultural dynamics between where he came from. Where he came from, the fairy tale of the big house and the white picket fence is really that. It's a fairy tale. It's aspirational. And then he comes here and he's like, well, wait, I think I'm smarter than that person and I work harder. Why can't I have it? And so it just tells them his journey in corporate America. And then the book ends up with some data and information in terms of the demographics. You look at any of the Census Bureau information, and there's going to be a shift in about 20 years or less when half the country is going to be Caucasian, and half probably will be a mix of multiracial, and so that's coming. And so the whole thrust here is not only telling the story of Mr. Enriquez, but also looking at the larger picture in terms of what does this mean for America, the American workforce, its ability to compete globally for talent. If we don't have workplaces that recognize and embrace people like Mr. Enriquez.
I love it. What was the most powerful element for me in writing and reading this book is reflecting on our own student body here at the Community College of Aurora. And so for those that don't know, Community College of Aurora, 67% of our students are students of color, 52% of our students are first generation. We have over 90 countries represented here at the Community College of Aurora. And, as I read this book, Dr. Lopez, it made me reflect on a word that you just used that I would love for you to speak a bit more on. That is the actualization. And as these students are coming from different parts of the world, and they're coming here with the idea and the dreams and the aspirations of what an American education and an American market can provide to them and their families, there's so much of that driver, that focus of aspiring to achieve that is ingrained in this book, along with the various implications and challenges in learning the environment, and then the data and its infusion. It's just this beautiful infusion of information and a story being told. For someone that's watching, listening to this, what did you do in your personal journey as someone coming from Belize to achieve what you've achieved? Matter of fact, let's just highlight a bit of this now. So you have worked a storied history in higher education. You have served as a consultant in Higher Learning Commission. You've worked as a vice president of government affairs for Apollo Education Group, vice president of planning and research for a higher education management consulting firm, an institutional research analyst. You have a doctorate from the University of Arizona. So you've accomplished so much thus far in your life, and I'm sure much more that isn't being listed today. So how did you achieve reach the point from aspiration to realization? What were some of those lessons that you can share with us on today that someone can learn from and take from your journey?
It's a great question, Dr. Brownlee, and I thank you and appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. Some of the things, immigrants tend to come here with a lens of, I need to not raise issues. I need to just stay in my lane, don't cause trouble, and stay out of legal jeopardy and things of that nature. But that's a very low risk existence, and at times, in order to learn what needs to be learned and get in the circles and learn, probably most importantly, the social and organizational politics to achieve, you kind of have to be a little bit more aggressive, cautiously. So for me, it was, okay, I'm living this life. They're living a different one. How do I get there? What are they doing that I'm not, or I don't even know about that I should? And so it's pursuing those things. And I just highlighted the organizational politics because in a work setting, there are all kinds of things to interpret that no one will tell you. And as an immigrant, you don't have any idea. You're just coming to work, punching the clock, doing what you do, trying to get a good performance review and move on to the next year where hopefully there's a raise involved. You're somewhat unaware that there's a larger politics underway of who's grooming who's looking at who for what, who's leaving. All of these things are underway. And so I learned eventually that it was getting into those circles to know what's happening that we don't see, that were actually the keys to progress, at least in the corporate world, and in the journey professionally. Socially, you're hit with all kinds of reminders that you might be the different one. And sometimes I have to say that we come to it with that lens, knowing we're different, and there can be a self-fulfilling prophecy by cornering ourselves unnecessarily. So it's reaching out to people and accessing data, information, and social dynamics that we may not have been raised with and that are very different from what's typical to us, but are absolutely key to changing your life here in America.
I love it. Share with us right now. So we're going to transition from the book a bit more about your personal journey and story. So your doctorate is from the University of Arizona. Tell us a bit more. So you also served the U.S. Navy. You hold dual citizenship in the U.S. Belizean citizenship, and we certainly know that you enjoy from your bio and team. I'll be sure to feature the bio there in YouTube in the description, but enjoys golf, traveling, philanthropic work in Belize. Tell us about what were the steps for someone that's watching this seeking inspiration. What were the steps that led you to the doctorate at the University of Arizona? What were the steps that led you to service in the U.S. Navy? And thank you for your service. What were those steps or those inspirations that led you to take the steps? Because I would imagine there wasn't necessarily a pathway or a blueprint for you to follow. You had to create this journey for yourself. So walk us a bit through some of those lessons that someone can learn from you on today about how you charted this path for yourself.
Sure. First, my family has been my muse. They've been there to guide me. Like I said, I'm the youngest of a large family, but I had the good fortune of being the last, so I could learn from everyone else. And so they were always just putting things in my ear, never telling me what to do. They wouldn't do that. They'd just say, "You should think about this." So listening to them was really important because they had charted that path as well. But at different ages. I came here when I was quite young, in early elementary school. One of my siblings came at 19, which is a very different experience. But listening to my family was important, and just them pushing me. And then as I progressed, I got my bachelor's, and then I got incredibly involved in politics at the time because I was trying to understand so many dynamics of life. When I worked at the legislature is when I realized education was my thing. But then I learned I didn't want to be a K-12, so I went to higher ed. And there I learned so much. A grant comes in, it's supposed to be for low-income and gifted students, the community in which there's the highest percentage of low income, which are minority students typically. They get none of the money and it goes to all the gifted people in different areas. And I'm like, wait, how did that just happen with no discussion? And so watching those things happen, I was like, there's more that I'm not seeing. How do I get to know them more? And so the senator for whom I worked, I could study 4 or 5 hours. She'd come in 15 minutes and ask me 7 questions I never thought about. And I'd look at her and say, how do you do that? I would just get so frustrated. I'm like, this is not right. So that's what led me to, okay, there's more I need to know. That's what led me to the master's. And then my daughter was born. I realized I needed a way to secure, set a floor for my salary, my professional aspirations. And I thought the most logical way to do that was to get the doctorate. And so that was kind of my path. But I have to say, Doc, all along the way, when I got the bachelor's, I thought, okay, now I have a life that they have. But there's this whole other group here that I don't know what they're doing. Why can't I have that? And so I said, okay, I want to match that. And then once I achieved that, I thought, wait, now I think I'm better than the majority. Is there another level? And there was, so I kept asking, how then do I get to that level? So I kept asking that question repeatedly and trying to find out what it took. And I was fortunate enough to be exposed to people who could help me or willing to share what the keys were.
I've got to ask Dr. Lopez, for someone that's seeking to build their network, one of the things that I started hearing as you were sharing that is that you were able to have supportive networks, or you found a way to create supportive networks for yourself to make that journey. You talked about family, but then, working with legislators and serving in the spaces that you have. How did you create that network? What is there some advice you can share there in terms of someone who, again, wants to make the climb, doesn't have a strong network themselves, they're going to have to create it? What would you say to that group?
That's a great question. I would say, I'll talk about the key for me and then try to convert and switch
Absolutely.
to what they might do depending on where they are. For me, I insisted on making clear I'm going to be successful no matter what, with a confidence, but an absolute humility, meaning there are things I can learn from you. Please teach me. So even though I made it clear I'm going to keep moving and keep moving toward my goals, I would love for you to help me. So it wasn't an arrogant situation. It wasn't I know everything. It was the application of one of my favorite slogans in life for me, and that's undaunted but not immune. I was always going to go and go and go and go. I see the barriers, I see the roadblocks, I see the haters, so to speak. I see it all, but I put it in its proper context and I keep moving. And I think after time, people would see, we should help this guy. And once I found someone who's willing to help me, I embraced it. I didn't have to like it, I embraced it. And so with each position, I tried to build that cadre of people who are willing to say, he's a good guy, he's willing to work hard, let's help him. So that's how I, over time, built my network through various channels and industries and so on. I will say, though, there's a difference between building a network and actually utilizing it. It took me a long time and I had to get over myself, I'll be honest. I didn't want to ask anyone for help. I had a pretty good network, but I rarely reached out to them to ask. It was more to inform and let them decide whether they wanted to help me. And over time, I realized there's value in thinking about, humbly saying, I would really appreciate your guidance or thoughts on this.
Love it. I love it. Let's transition. I'm looking at the time here, and I'm greatly enjoying our conversation. There's so many gems that you're dropping. Let's talk about what you're doing now, what you've got going on now. You've just accepted a new role, Chief Executive Officer of Intercambio, uniting communities located in Boulder County, Colorado, and President of Lopez Research and Consulting. So talk to us a bit about what you're up to now and how you're adding value to society.
Sure, and I'm probably more excited about this role than many others because of its mission and impact. The last few years have made clear the centrality of and importance of immigrants and accepting talent from all directions. Well, and I'll be even a little more contemporary. We see planes and buses of immigrants shifting across the country. We see students coming, wanting, now that things are a little more open than they were, 3 years ago. We see students coming, wanting to take advantage and better themselves. So Intercambio, what we do is we provide courses, we provide classes for adult learners who are trying to learn English. So COVID accelerated our organizational strategy in that we had to figure out a way to do this online. So the value here is if you don't speak English, whether you're from Ukraine, Bangladesh, wherever you may be from, we have the resources and a methodology of teaching English using a volunteer corps, frankly, and we teach them how to do this. And because we know that communication is the foundation of success. And so when someone no longer has to take an interpreter to the doctor when their child is in the hospital, that becomes huge. And so providing the resources and opportunity to learn English and create a little more independence, that's what Intercambio is all about, and building community that way.
You're going to be doing some great work. We thank you for who you are. You know, the last question I have for you, Dr. Lopez, is the last question I'd like to ask all of our guests. The name of the show is called Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai. And so what I like to do is to give our guests an opportunity to share with us your personal mission statement and a sense of your why that has led you to that mission statement. So share with us right now, Dr. Lopez, what is your personal mission statement?
Sure. Simply stated, it's almost like a world peace kind of thing, but it's to positively impact everyone with whom I interact on a regular basis. That could be family, friends, colleague at work, and that could mean different things. For some, it means sitting down with them, sharing just time, focused time. Some, it's let's take you out to a nice meal that you might not treat yourself to. For some, it's just giving of yourself. So it's a variety of ways in which you give back to humanity so they know we see them, they count, they're important.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, you just had an opportunity to hear the wisdom of Dr. John Lopez, author of the book, An Immigrant in the C-Suite, From Journey Lessons for the Business Community, as well as now CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Intercambio, Uniting Communities, located in Boulder County, Colorado. Dr. Lopez, thank you so much for your time. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai and my special guest, Dr. John Lopez. Dr. Lopez, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom shared. As I like to do at this point in the show, I like to offer up 3 takeaways for myself from this interview that I would like for you to reflect on, and you think about what your personal takeaways are as well. But here are my 3. Number 1, Dr. Lopez talked about being confident to achieve your goals, no matter the challenge, and being willing and ready to learn from others. So that was very powerful. He also talked about having to humble himself and be willing to accept the help of others. I appreciated that from Dr. Lopez. Secondly, he talked about embrace when someone is willing to help you. I thought that was powerful. It's not just hearing that someone is willing to help you, but actually taking advantage of the help they're willing to offer. Very powerful. Another tool on how to humble ourselves as we navigate these different spaces. Last but certainly not least, he's mentioned to understand the difference in building your network and utilizing your network. Again, as we think about how to navigate these spaces, how to actualize, we talked about that in the interview, how to actualize our dreams and our aspirations, we have to learn not only to build a network, but to utilize that network. I wish you all the absolute best. I look forward to seeing you next time at itsdrmordecai.com. Take care, everybody.